Okay, so we are here today in Columbus, Ohio, and I am Cindy Orlasky, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Ms. Ming Fisher. And I noticed from your email that your real name is Madeline.
Yes.
I never knew that.
Not many people do.
So now the world knows. And it is March 21st. We have entered spring 2024. And so I see here that you have assembled a variety of things. Would you like to share any of those at first?
Well, when we the association in America, all of the boards were in an organization, the Association of State Psychology Boards. And then after so many years, Canada joined us.
Oh.
So they changed the name to ASPPB, Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. So and then they would have meetings once or twice a year at various places all over the country. And we would always get a bag with the things we needed to have at the meeting.
So did this association exist in 73 when you started?
Oh, no.
Because there were not that many states that had licensing boards?
Well, there was ASPPB, Association of State Psychology Boards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know just when it started, but it was probably started then because Ohio may have been one of the later years to have Board of Psychology. There may have been lots of other states that already had it.
Okay.
Had a board,
So you became involved at the national organization right from your start?
I think so, yeah. And then a few years later, when they added Canadian provinces, that's when they changed the name of that organization.
Okay. And that is the organization that ended up creating an award in your name?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was awarded somebody else's name, and then after a few years they changed the award name to my name. So that's why I was surprised it's still there.
It still exists.
I thought so.
Although apparently no one has been worthy in the last couple of years. And what else do you have here?
Well, this is the way we used to, when we would have new psychology rules, we would print them out. They don't do that anymore. They're all online, but these were we would print the law and rules, and we would hand these out to each person who was, if they were getting licensed, we would give it to them, or we would send it to all of the current members, and these were.
And as there would be changes, you would then mail things out.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
These were the rules.
A lot fewer pages.
That are based on the revised code 4732. We would make rules according to what was required in the state law. And these were another printing of the rules.
And this
as they changed,
mm-hmm.
we would reprint them.
And these look like they were almost mimeographed or something in the old.
Yeah. This was in April of 75. This one was 76.
Very thin.
Mm-hmm. And this was the revised code, the law of psychology.
So this is what was passed in 72, I think?
Well, I don't know that.
So that was the very first law they passed.
Yeah, see, this says effective September 72. And that was probably when it started. See, the board was started in 1972. I didn't start there until 74.
Oh, I thought you were in 73.
No.
Okay.
No.
So who ran the office until you got there?
Well, there were 2 or 3 people working in the office. And then I think one of them resigned. She either was having a baby or needed to take care of the baby. So she left and they needed one other person, so that's when I joined. My son had many health issues, ADHD, and bipolar.
They probably didn't call it that back then, huh?
And when he was in kindergarten, they said he would probably have trouble learning to read, and so suggested they told me about Dr. Blythe, who was a psychologist, and they thought he would be a good source. So we went to see Dr. Blythe, and he had started a school called Sixpence for kids who had problems like that. So we took our child out of Bexley schools, or kindergarten. I mean, he finished kindergarten, but then instead of keeping him there, we changed to Sixpence School, which was here in Columbus. And I would drive him to work, or drive him to school every day, every morning. So of course we got to know Dr. Blythe, and he was the first president of the State Board of Psychology.
Uh-huh.
He had license number 1.
I wondered about that.
Yes. So several years later, since our 3 kids were all in school, I went to work as a Kelly girl. And one of my jobs was at a place that a psychologist was also working there. And I'm not sure if he told me that they needed somebody or if Dr. Blythe told me, but anyway, that's how I got started at the State Board of Psychology as an administrative assistant.
And then just moved on up.
Well, there was no executive director position, and the president of the board ran the Board of Psychology, ran the office, but he wasn't there in the office, but really ran. But there were the 2 of us administrative assistants. I was the licensing side, and Vicki Hedges was the investigation side. And then so that was 74. It wasn't until 1993 that they established an executive director position, and I got it. So I was there. I was the first one for 7 years until I retired in 2001.
But you worked for the board for a total of 30 years.
27 years.
27.
74 to 2001.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning, were there a lot of complaints? You talked about having the investigator person. So were there complaints filed right off the bat?
They always had something going. Investigating, and they would have a meeting with the person to determine what they were going to do. Occasionally it would mean their license was gone, but otherwise it would just be certain things they had to do. But I didn't know as much about that because I was working with the rules and the laws and the licensure, because the applications would come. One of the board members was the examiner. That meant that person looked over their application and determined whether they were authorized, whether they were okay to get a license. So when the applications came in, I went over them, looked at their academic record and so forth, and determined that they had met the requirements. Then I would take all those files and go to wherever the examiner lived and talk to them about it, and they usually just approved it.
So initially, were there a lot of people that applied? Because there weren't licenses before this period of time.
There were 3 numbers in the licenses for quite a while.
Like hundreds, like
Yeah,
110.
110, yeah.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Blythe had 1, and the rest of the board, that took 7 or 8.
And you grandfathered some people, right?
I'm sure they did, but see, I wasn't
you weren't
there
involved
then.
in that part of it.
So I don't know how that got handled.
There was a written exam?
I think I took part in the first written exam, probably in either fall of 74, or maybe spring of 75. We gave them twice a year, spring and fall. And we would order so many exams. I think they were shipped from New York.
So it was a national exam.
Oh,
they
yeah.
were standardized.
Yeah, and we would get the stuff shipped to us. We would set up a hotel, I think here in Columbus, somewhere that we would have the night before the exam. A lot of the people from out of town would come and stay at that hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd be there for the first thing in the morning when the exam started. And of course, Columbus people could just come in. And I ran the exam, and then afterwards, I would collect them and ship them back that very day, so we didn't have exams laying around anywhere. I'd ship them back to New York. And that lasted until 2001, and I took part in the first computer exam. And then we had a meeting place.
But there was no paper and pencil or anything.
Yeah.
It was all on the computers.
Yeah.
So you proctored it to make sure it was
Yeah.
all done appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was an oral exam after that?
Yes, after. If they passed the written exam, then we would set up an oral exam session, and the board would give them run those.
Mm-hmm. And was it your job to call people and tell them whether they failed or passed, or
yeah.
they got a letter?
Oh, they got a letter, but sometimes I would call somebody who was really worried about it, or I kind of.
There was some personal touch back
Yeah.
then.
So they would be very happy to hear that they did pass.
So, anything else here you want to share from?
Well,
I'm amazed you kept all this stuff.
Well, when you called me, I started looking around in different hidden boxes and things. You asked sort of how, if we had anything to do with the Ohio Psychological Association, and we certainly did. We partnered with them all the time. They put out this.
I remember the Ohio Psychologist, and I had several boxes of these, and I'll admit I didn't keep all of them a few years ago.
You have one.
Oh, I still have some.
Oh,
I
okay.
saved some, but the 3 pillars of the Board of Psychology.
But I was a little upset because you would think they would have it this way, but I was in the center picture,
I would
and
recognize
Vicki
you.
was in the right.
So-
Yeah, but other people.
So
wouldn't
they
know
would have
that.
thought this was you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
But all the heels and the nylons and the dress, it was very dressed up. And
yeah, it used to be quite formal.
so the Vicky that's in that picture, she was there from the beginning with you. She was the
Yes.
investigative person.
Yes.
And I remember talking to a Sarah.
Yes, Sarah Gavinsky was at the front desk of the board office.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another person there, I can't remember her name.
And this was back in '89.
Yeah.
And the Ohio Psychology Association no longer publishes this in print either. You have to look at it on the computer.
I imagine that. And they would have different meetings, and they also sold. And so this was a vest that I got.
And it's still good.
Yeah, it sure is.
And this the State Board of Psychology from 88, 89, what was that? Was that a meeting?
Dr. David Rogers, who was
Uh-huh.
the president of the board at the time, got these shirts for all the board and the staff. So I've been wearing it ever since.
And as I was trying to look up information, because I thought, well, you must have been the first executive director,
Yes.
but I couldn't quite piece the timeline. You can't find that on the internet. I mean, it's just
Oh,
not
really?
there.
Oh.
Because somebody would have to put it in, and nobody put the information in.
Oh.
But David Rogers had written an article about the whole process of setting up the Board of Psychology
Oh.
and getting licensing. And he wrote at the top of it, he's writing this article because no one might ever know if no one records it.
Well, that's
And so, yeah,
very true.
he has been someone who has maintained a lot of the history, huh?
Uh-huh. He was
So you even kept your name tag, huh?
No, this is the name tag. We
Oh,
wear
that's a
these
name
here
tag for here. I thought you were, I
Because-
thought it was still your name
so
tag.
that everybody knows who they're.
And that they belong here, right?
Yeah, well, it's so that you get to know your neighbors
Okay.
and don't forget when you walk by somebody, you don't remember their name. It helps if you wear your name tag.
If your eyesight is good enough. Yeah. Okay, and what's a purple one up there? I didn't read that when the First International Congress on Licensure, Certification, and Credentialing of Psychologists.
See that?
International.
Well, that the ASPPB.
Canada, US.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the first time Canada and
Well,
US sort of got
I
together?
suppose so. I don't remember just which year this was. But we would have meetings. One time in British Columbia. One time we met in California on the Queen Mary.
Oh,
We stayed on the Queen Mary. That was where the convention was. So we got to do a lot of nice places. One time we went to someplace in Northern Europe. And while I was there, I took the Orient Express. So
good for you.
you got to do a lot of nice things
Mm-hmm.
because I would pay for my own trips to go to those conventions because I like to do some other things along with it.
And back then, meetings were face to face because you didn't have Zoom.
Oh yeah,
so-
yeah.
And you didn't have conference calls for 50 people or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Was there a lot of variability between the states and the rules and stuff, or?
I suppose so. Yeah, because each state had their own, and they had their own problems, and if you went from one state to the other, you might have to do something extra to get the license in the new state.
And that's still true despite the progress on the Psych Pack.
Well, I
Yeah,
assume so.
but it's still true that you really have to know what the license requirements
Yeah.
are in the other state
Yeah,
and abide by them.
and have passed the exam, or however. But I had various.
You saved a lot and you kept it.
I'm pretty sure it was Vytautas Bieliauskas. He was on the board real early. And he was the one that used to write poems about different people.
Wow.
I wrote that about somebody.
So he actually knew people well enough to write something about it.
Well, yeah, another board member.
Okay, like Dave Rogers jumped in with pen scribbling mightily. Meetings were nothing if they weren't quite lively.
I got that wrong. It's Henry Leland.
Uh-huh.
Henry Leland wrote the when I retired, Henry wrote this. So that tells me who wrote these poems.
So he wrote the earliest too.
Yeah, I imagine he did.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you made your name made the way into the poems too, huh?
Yeah, I guess so.
So there was really a lot of personal relationships then, huh?
And I just found these this morning looking for more stuff. I didn't remember, evidently the Board of Psychology, the members would write,
This was a performance review, huh?
yeah.
Uh-huh. And we'll note they're all excellent.
And let's see.
So the first line here says, at Ohio State he hadn't enough to do, so Henry was eager to join the zoo. So do you think Henry wrote that, or do you think maybe you were right, that
Well,
someone else wrote that?
I'm not, I can't say
Or whether
about
he was
that.
writing about himself.
Yeah.
And this was back in the days of Bill Gilbert, huh?
William Gilbert, yeah, he was.
And Julie Wright.
Uh,
Julie Wright and
I don't remember her. Joyce Alexander was on the board.
I remember that name. Because the board members had to do the oral exams, right?
Yes.
And I remember people that had oral exams from her.
They would have 2 or 3 of the board members, and then the people, the contestants would come into the office and meet with them.
And not everybody
Not the whole-
passed. And not everybody passed the oral exam too. I've had colleagues that had to go for a second round.
Yeah. And I didn't even realize it. I found a letter here, things where I had been, the state had classified me as something, and I was supposed to be something else, so I had to go through a review to be an administrative assistant too. And that went through okay.
Because you were a state employee.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We, when I first joined in '74, the office was across from the Palace Theater on the building on the alley between High Street and Front Street. And then we moved to 3rd Street and Broad Street on the northeast corner of that corner.
So you were always right down by the State House, not
And then-
far.
And then later then we went down to 65 South Front Street, which is the Supreme Court building now.
Hmm.
Our office was there. We looked out on the river on that. And then the final place, when the Rife Center was built,
Mm-hmm.
we moved to there. And again, we looked out west from our office.
And what floor were you on there?
At the 8th floor, I think.
So you
On
could
the
see
right
a
side.
little bit
Oh,
of the city.
Yeah.
So anything that you would like to share, any particular stories from that long time? Anything that was particularly challenging to deal with? My particular memory is always having to ask you if I could have more than 4 people on my license. That's my remembering. Like I'd always be writing me a letter. Can I add so-and-so? Can I take so-and-so off of my license?
You mean to be
Supervised,
supervising them?
right, yeah. And that was all done by paper and pencil back and forth. And
No, I think I enjoyed the personal relationships with the people who were applying and going through the process and the board members. And I just enjoyed being as helpful as I could. One time I got a letter was transferred from the governor's office. Because he had received a letter from somebody in another state saying how good the Board of Psychology had treated him. And
well, that's pretty impressive.
I wanted to have that. I wanted to give people that impression because we wanted to help people who were psychologists are good.
Well, clearly you had a good personal experience with a psychologist, and that
Yes.
set you up to
Yeah.
have some positive attitudes. But I know we weren't always easy to deal with because there was a lot of anxiety around getting your license, not getting your license, making sure you don't get in trouble with the board. I mean, that was a lot of anxiety there.
And giving the exam, we had to think about where are we going to have the exam this time. And if the Quarter Horse Congress was meeting that week,
nothing in Ohio or nothing in Columbus.
It's very hard. All the hotels are full. So we went to very different ones all the time. The Southern Hotel and the one that used to be on East Broad Street, the Round Hotel. It was right by what would now be the COSI, and it used to be on East Broad Street, the same thing.
But the Southern was very nice. That was.
And sometimes it would be north on 161. We just
moved around. So, were there a lot of changes over the years? Was it hard to keep up with the changes, or was they not very dramatic? Or
yeah, it was okay to keep up. We just managed to deal with what we had to deal with. And the board was, when I retired, a psychologist took my place, and I suggested to the board that they make him be the examiner so that they didn't have to be traveling all the time to.
And did they do that? Did they take your?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they did.
And now he's retiring. Huh?
Oh, is
Ron
he?
Ross is retiring, I hear, in June. Yeah.
Oh, no, I hadn't heard.
So now we'll have our third person, right?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I knew Ron's been there for 20 years, over 20 years now.
Not a lot of turnover in that position.
Mm-hmm. There were about 3 people out in the front office, and then Vicki and Mark Levy, he came and helped Vicki in the investigation part of it.
So you weren't part of that process, so you didn't have to give people the bad news that they were going to suspend their license or what penance they had to pay for violating something.
No, I didn't have anything to do with that.
Did the board grow in number over the time you were there, or was it consistent?
Well, they had, I think it was pretty consistent. There were 1 or 2 not psychologists.
Okay, so that's the same as it is.
And one of those people lives here now. One of the former board members, Ed Whips.
So any advice or words of wisdom for younger members who didn't have the luck of having your counsel at those over those many years?
Oh, I can't think of anything. I'm sure Ron has taken good care of them and wants to do the same to help people get the license they need.
And keep it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea how many there are now.
I don't either. I know I'm in the 3000s, and
really?
And I've had that license since the 80s, so we're we might have added another digit on there.
Is that about?
Well, the psychology, the OPA also gave you an award one year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I forget what they called that, Administrative Services Award. Did they create that for you as well? Or?
I don't know. I don't know where I had that.
You were a very important player for many years for psychologists.
No, I don't know.
I think I wrote down exactly what it was called, but
Yeah, I think I remember
the
seeing.
OPA, that was in 1999, the Outstanding Administrator Service Award.
That was just doing what you felt was best to do.
But not everybody does that, and we know that. So here I did have a list, like I was doing my homework, and so I found, this was up to date as
Oh my goodness.
2016 of the Ming Fisher Award from the State Association
Oh,
organization.
Ron got it.
Ron, they did, but then look what happened here here's 16, and then the award was not given, and then they did have a couple people, and then since 2020, they haven't given the award. So, not everybody can live up to your standards.
Well, maybe they created a different reward.
Award that they're not gonna give that anymore? They didn't say award discontinued or anything.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
So pretty impressive. So there were many people that have,
Oh, yeah.
and in different states. I mean, they
Uh-huh.
went across the country, California, Missouri, Arizona.
I had no idea it was still in existence. Thank you.
See, you live on. And people are probably saying, I wonder who that Ming Fisher is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I try to keep the same busy here at the village.
When I called, because how we tracked you down, I don't know if you know Karen Harden, but she's at the OPA board now, OPA, the staff office.
Mm.
And she said, well, I will call Ron Ross because I think he knows where Ming might be. And then she says, well, the last he knew, this is where you were. So when I called, I didn't know if you'd still be here. So I was trying to word it very carefully. And they go, oh, Ming, yeah, she helps out all over the place here.
Well, that's very nice of them.
So you keep busy.
Yes.
So you crochet or knit?
Knit. Yeah.
And then are there, do you participate in the activities?
Yeah,
Here
here-
say have horticulture and,
These tables, we make fleece blankets. The fleece is over there. We lay out 2 layers of fleece, cut strips all around them, and then tie those 2 strips together with knots to make fleece blankets that we donate to Ronald McDonald House.
wonderful.
And our bus takes us down there. Once or twice, we took 50 blankets the last time.
I also had a child I still have the child, she's an adult now, but she had issues, medical issues, and I've stayed at a Ronald McDonald House in my past, so I am very strongly supportive, yeah. Okay, well, we'll see how the video turned out, and I can probably send you a digital copy so that you can look at it too. I'm hoping the sound worked because my dog didn't talk when I practiced, so I didn't get to check the sound. But I'll hope it works. If not, I'll just have to call you and say I'm gonna come down again, and maybe next time I'll take you up on your lunch invitation.
Yes. I'd be glad to have you do that. All right.
Okay, so no final words. We're pretty much covered.
Thank you very much for coming, and it's been a joy to talk about the Psychology Board and Ohio Psychological Association. Hi.
Okay, well, and the little red light is still on, so that should mean that we really did record it.